Welcome, everybody, to In the Zone. I'm Rich Sutter with my ride mate, Pete Coles. We're here on a beautiful, beautiful June 1st in Massachusetts. Supposed to top 91 degrees on the chart today. So we're excited about the beautiful weather here. Excited to be back in the studio for episode number 12. We missed you last week. We were excited to get back in the studio this week. There's a lot to talk about, a lot going on in the NBA. First and foremost, we're going to jump right in with the untimely demise of the hometown Celtics. And just ask Pete a quick question here as we go into Feed 'em Fish. Pete, should the Celtics fire Joe Mazzulla?
Yeah, because I think that was a failure of coaching. I don't think that's a failure of the players because the players were able to rally themselves for 3 games, and then the letdown. Nobody motivated them in the last game because they were blown out.
Yeah, that last game, it looked like they came all the way back for nothing.
Right.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different take on this one, Pete, because I think the Celtics might have set this young man up for failure.
I know you've commented on that in the past.
You know, by giving him the job in this fashion. And again, they didn't have a lot of options at the time, the way that everything went down with their previous coach. But I just think that here's a suggestion for the Celtics front office, all right? When you had Phil Jackson and they were running triangle offense, there was a gentleman that sat behind Phil Jackson by the name of Tex Winter. And he was the architect, the guru of the triangle offense. He was the guy who did all of the X's and O's stuff for those championship teams. When he left Chicago, Phil Jackson left Chicago to go to Los Angeles. Tex Winter was the first hire that he made and brought him with him. So I would suggest to the Celtics that somewhere in this realm of the NBA, find a Tex Winter type for Coach Mazzulla, because I'll be honest with you, I saw some of the things that you're talking about, Pete, in the game, some of the coaching things, you know, hey, we should have called timeout here. Hey, we can't have Marcus Smart taking all the last-second shots because he's not our A guy. We have to have our A or B guy taking those last-second shots, and I think that was those two things really, really stuck out to me. But I really I enjoyed and came to have affection for Coach Mazzulla in his press conferences. I thought his conferences after the game were right on spot, and he handled himself very, very well in a difficult situation. And so for that part of it, I thought he was a really good ambassador for the Celtics. They need to do better basketball-wise. They also need to get better in the front office as well, because they need to improve that team a little bit in order to make them better. But right now we have the Nuggets and we have the Heat. I don't think anybody in the front office was rooting for that. But today, as we promised, Pete, we're also going to do our NBA draft episode 2, where we've now cleaned up everything, put everybody into it, and just when you think you have it all settled, Zach Edey, the big man from Purdue, takes his name out of the draft, which was his right to do, and he will return to Purdue. What does that do in the landscape of the draft? Because what I did was I wanted to kind of make this less personalized in my system. I wanted to make this a little bit more about data, but also have some emotion still in the formula. But when I all came down to it, when it all was resolved, when I did my data analysis, my RSS analysis, as I say, when I applied that to every player that was in this draft board, there were 60 players that were in a draft board with their full complement of statistics. And what I did was I took each player in 5 categories. We took the categories of points, rebounds, block shots, assists, and steals. Those are the 5 categories to me that make up a basketball player. Okay? And it gives you an insight into what you're doing. Zach Edey, the big man out of Purdue, 7'4", 285 pounds. Now, we took everybody's stats from wherever they came from. We didn't have time to do any analysis and bell curve. Okay, overtime elite league isn't as good as the G League. The G League's not as good as the NCAA. So we didn't have time to bell curve that. And with Wembayana in France, we didn't have time to look at that as well. So what we did was we took the numbers that they all had and we created an RSS score. And the RSS score for Zach Edey was off of the charts. He was a 44. which was the highest point total that we awarded to anybody. And so just based on that fact right there, we kept him in our number one spot in the draft, but he also decided to pull himself out. But before we jump into the draft, we're going to do two things of considerable weight today. We're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs at the end, but we're going to do the NBA draft, and I've got 2 rounds to go. So we're going to move quickly, and we're going to go through it. But I also did want to talk about a little bit about what goes into the draft process with some general managers. What are they thinking about? How things can change and evolve in the moment. For example, you'll see a number of trades happen on June 25th or leading up to June 25th, where a bunch of teams will try and change position, exchange players, and exchange different other draft picks possibly to move their position in the draft either up or down. And I think that'll be interesting when that comes down. But also the subjectivity of what goes into what do the NBA teams need at that time, as we talked about. If you have LeBron James, you might not be looking for that type of player. You might be looking for some complementary players to LeBron James. And so we didn't really factor any of that in this draft. What we did was we put an RSS score on every single one of these guys, and we lived with it. And it was interesting to see that the way that everything came out. We'll get into that in a bit. But I got a couple of things for you, Pete. And I know that you've probably heard of ChatGPT.
Yep.
AI, and they're doing all sorts of different stuff on Twitter, and there was a couple of things that I thought were interesting that I wanted to share with you and with the fans. Okay, so the top 10 coaches of all time. Who would be your number one, Pete?
Jeez, that's tough. I think Red Auerbach might be number one.
We're NCAA only. My apologies.
NCAA only.
My apologies.
Wow. Who was the USC coach in the 70s? What's his name?
John Wooden.
John Wooden.
Okay, that's who they chose as number one. John Wooden, number one. Mike Krzyzewski, number 2.
I can see that.
Adolph Rep, number 3. Not
How
really
long
sure
ago
about
was-
that. That was a long, long time ago.
Okay.
He was a trailblazer, but I'm not sure. I'd like to see some of the data on that. Number 4, Dean Smith from North Carolina. I don't think anybody in our business would ever have Dean Smith listed up above Bob Knight. But number 5 is Bob Knight of Indiana. I think he belongs a little bit higher than that in the whole formula. Number 6, Roy Williams. Number 7, this might surprise some people, but I think he's deserving, Jim Calhoun of UConn. Number 8, again, we're going back into the old days, Phog Allen of Kansas, Tom Izzo of Michigan State, and John Thompson of Georgetown. That's a pretty tight list. That's not bad. I did look at the list, and I said, okay, who's not on the list? I took a quick look. I'd love to see Pete Carroll on that list. I think he's the number one of all time when I look at basketball coaches and what they did with their program, with their career, and with everything that they had. I love Pete Carroll. But I also don't see Bill Self on this list, and there's absolutely no way you can convince me that Bill Self doesn't belong on that list. Okay, ChatGPT number 2 of In the Zone. They have listed the 10 most underrated players in the NBA, and then they compiled the 10 most overrated players in the NBA. I'm going to give you the most underrated players first. Number 1 in underrated, Reggie Miller. Number 2, John Stockton. Number 3, Alex English. Number 4, Sidney Moncrief. Number 5, Chris Webber. 6, Dennis Johnson of the Celtics. I can definitely see that one.
Yep.
Sam Jones, number 7 of the Celtics. Number 8, a good player that I knew back in the day, Bernard King from New York City, from Brooklyn. We also have Joe Dumars in the 9 hole and Drazen Petrovic of the Nets, who unfortunately died in a car crash. And ended his career very shortly. Here are the most overrated. I can agree with some of those names. I think that there's some pretty good ones on there. John Stockton, I think he was pretty well thought of. Reggie Miller, possibly underrated. Weber, I thought was very, very well thought of in his career, so I don't think you'd list him as an underrated guy. And I don't know about Bernard King being on that list either. Bernard King was a great player, and I think people represented that and knew that. Okay, so now we're going to the overrated section, and to all of my Syracuse fans out there, you're gonna not like this first name. The first name they have there, excuse me, is Carmelo Anthony from Syracuse. Number 2, Allen Iverson. Number 3, Vince Carter. Number 4, Dwight Howard. Number 5, Gilbert Arenas. Number 6, Paul Gasol. Number 7, Manu Ginobili. Number 8, Joe Johnson. Number 9, Shawn Kemp. Number 10, Derrick Rose. Okay, Carmelo Anthony overrated. I'm going to let that one slide. Allen Iverson, no way. He was a great player. Doesn't belong on the list. Vince Carter, the greatest dunker of all time in NBA history, I think. I don't think he belongs on the list either. Dwight Howard belongs on that list for sure. Gasol, Manu Ginobili, no way belongs on that list. He was a great player for the Spurs, led them to multiple championships with Tony Parker, with Timmy Duncan. There's no way that Ginobili belongs on this list. But I'm going to give you one that's not on this list, that they didn't put on the list, that I think you have to consider this gentleman as one of the most overrated players of all time. And people are going to go crazy when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most overrated players of all time. Probably missed more free throws than he made.
That's true.
So I think he was a force of nature, no question. But
he wasn't a complete player.
Wasn't a complete player, and there was a lot of things. And Kobe Bryant was very critical of him and his work ethic. And so I like to throw Shaq out there. I know the Big Diesel's always on TV with Charles Barkley. I think you could throw Shaquille O'Neal out there.
One of the best personalities in basketball.
Love him. And I liked him as a player too, but I think when it comes down to, we're measuring everybody, you know, and was he Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the sky hook? No. Was he Wilt Chamberlain that scored 100 points? No. Was he Bill Russell with the multiple rings? No. And so I think there was an opportunity there because he played with such great players also. I think there was an opportunity there for him to be much better. And I think he kind of missed the ball there. All right. The top 20, we're going to go into 3 quick things here again, ChatGPT. Top 25 college jobs in basketball. This was interesting. And then we're going to read a couple of other things that were real interesting that I picked up on Twitter that weren't ChatGPT, but that kind of, some of it backs this up and some of it goes, makes you look at it and go, wow. Okay. Number 1 college basketball job in all of the country is considered to be Kentucky. Number 2, North Carolina. Number 3, Kansas. Number 4, Duke. I think that's a little low. I'd put them over North Carolina for sure. Number 5, UCLA. Number 6, Indiana. Number 7, Texas. Number 8, Louisville. Number 9, Arizona. Number 10, UConn. Number 11, Michigan State. Number 12, Ohio State. 13 is Michigan. 14 is Villanova. 15, Arkansas. 16 is Gonzaga, which is low, I thought. 17 is Maryland. 18, Georgetown. 19 is Syracuse. 20 is Alabama. I thought Syracuse was a little bit low there myself. 21, Florida. 22, Illinois. 23, Tennessee. 24, Oregon. 25, Purdue. And
is Syracuse low because they haven't been in the championships in a while?
I would assume so, but we're gonna, and this is what we're gonna go back and back it up a little bit here with a couple of different stats. Now, this is the NCAA tournament record since 2003, 2004.
Okay.
All right, so this is their NCAA record as far as the amount of games that they've played and won since 2003, 2004. The number 1 team in that vein is North Carolina with a 50-14 record. Number 2 is Kansas, 46-17. Number 3 is Duke, 42-16. Number 4 is Kentucky. 5, Michigan State. 6, Gonzaga. So they have Gonzaga way down there as the 16th best job, but up here in the amount of playoff action that they've had, they list them number 6, and their percentage of 36-19 is really strong. Number 7, Villanova. 8, I thought this is one that they did it only by win total also, but 8, UConn, their percentage is outrageous. They're 33-8 since 2003 in the NCAA tournament. That's unbelievable. Okay. 9 is Florida at 32-11. 10, UCLA. 11, Wisconsin. 12, Louisville. 13, Michigan. 14, Syracuse. 24-13. So it kind of matches their number that they gave them. Xavier at 15, Ohio State at 16, Arizona at 17. I always thought that was really low for Arizona. They're 21-15 in that time. Butler was 18. 19 was Baylor. I thought they would have been a little higher. And West Virginia comes in at 20 with 19-13. So now the last piece of that before we head into the draft, is now I'm going to give you the NCAA overall record since 2003 and see how that stacks up.
Wait a minute. Are we taking into all the cupcake schedules that these guys have had?
We're taking in every game. We took everybody's schedule, but that allows other teams that you're going to see in here that'll kind of make you go, wow. Like, I'll give you an example. On the list of 24 is Vermont. You wouldn't normally expect to see them here, but they've had such a high standard over there that they've done such great stuff. But
they're ECAC?
They're
or
in
Yankee?
They're in the America East, I believe
America
they
East
call
now,
it
okay.
now. They've changed it about 4 or 5 different times. So number one team, NCAA overall record since 2003 with a 584 and 106 percentage is Gonzaga. Number 2, Kansas, 584 and 132. Duke, 566 and 143. 4, UNC. 5, Kentucky. 6, Villanova. 7, Memphis. I thought that was high for Memphis. 8, Michigan State. 9, Arizona. 10, St. Mary's, Wisconsin. San Diego State. VCU coming in at 13. I thought that was an Atlantic 10 team that did very well. Florida is in there at 14, Ohio State at 15, Louisville at 16, 17 for Syracuse, so it pretty much maps out where they put them. 18 UCLA, 19 Belmont, and Wichita State came in at 20th, and that's all I'm going to read for right now. But we did have Vermont go in on the 24 hole. So I thought that was really interesting. And so when you say these are the best jobs in the business, are those jobs represented? Because one of the teams they listed as one of the best jobs in the business was Oregon. And Oregon's not really represented in this numerical total here. Maybe they believe because Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, is the head of Oregon, that makes it a great job, and it really, really might be. But I don't know what the all criteria that they put into this. Since 2003, you would think if you looked at it historically, St. John's is certainly one of those programs that's had a great history. But if you look at it historically, that's pretty much the way it's gone down. You know, what you hear at the top is a really kind of a 4-column start there, where you have Kansas, you have Duke, you have North Carolina. You know, those 3 are really, really tight up in there. You know, and then you can slide Duke and North Carolina and Kansas, and then you have different people up there at the top as well. But Kentucky is without question one of those 4 columns as well. So if you go Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, and North Carolina, that's really the 4 pillars of college basketball right there.
Sure.
All right. So are you ready to slide into the draft, Pete?
Yes.
Now, quick announcement that we have here as we're preparing our draft. The last 3 days, I've taken out my computer. I've gone to paper. I'm on different lines here, and I have a board where I'm writing on, a whiteboard that I'm writing on. So I've got like 4 or 5 different venues here that I'm working from just to kind of put all of these pieces together. It really is a mosaic. And when you look at it, I think that the way we looked at it this way, and again, we're going to offer the fans one more shot at this. I'm going to put it all together right before the draft starts, and at one of our other shows, we're going to do both rounds in this. But right now, we are ready to start our In the Draft round 2 of round 2. Okay? We picked Zach Edey to be our number 1. His numbers were overwhelming in the analysis that we did. Now, since that time, and this is what makes this a little bit complicated, is Judah Mintz from Syracuse has taken his name out of the draft. But so far, the biggest name to take his name out of the draft is our big guy, Zach Edey, who we had at number 1, 7'4", 285 pounds. Now, this is something I want to be real clear on. There are no mock drafts. There are no areas where Zach Edey's even represented in the first round. I would imagine, and this is one thing, Pete, that I'm going to tell you is a good piece of the NIL deal. The only piece that I can find that has any good stuff about it is the NIL deal is letting people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds make better decisions about staying in school. So it used to be, I got to jump into the pros because I need the money. Now, okay, I'm getting $750,000 a year. I can hold my horses in college another year while I'm making that good money, and then I can get better and better prepared to enter into the pros. So I think as I started
Are you starting to soften on this?
No.
Okay.
100% not. But I wanted to find something that was positive of it. I wanted to at least think through their brain and say, what is going on here? That why would you see any advantage to this? That's one advantage I do see. I
Okay.
certainly don't think that that's a big enough advantage where we're going to pick up all of the pieces and run this thing and rip the whole thing up and say, yeah, this is how we do it from now on.
Okay.
I think they've gotten way too far ahead of themselves with this. They punted all the way down the field, and it's just I'm never going to soften my stance on this because,
Okay.
and I'll tell you why, Pete, because it goes to the absolute core of what the whole thing is, and you cannot change the core of something and remain the same. And so this is at the very, very existence and core of college basketball. That's why it matters. That's why I've railed against it as much as I have. But it's also now a Wild West show, and we know what that happens. I said this before, but I'll say it again, and I'll add more clarity to it. When you pay a gentleman $1 million and he can pick up his phone and make a bet on his own game now because he has $1 million a year and he goes out and plays that game, he can do his own point shaving. He can adjust that game. If he's a great player, he can adjust that game, come and go as he wants, gets down to the end of the game. Oops, I'm up by 7 and we need it to be 6. The ball goes out of bounds. Oops, now I missed a free throw. Oops, now it's very, very staggering to me what could happen. But let's stay on the positive side of things today, Pete. Let's be happy, and let's hope that Charlie Baker can get some of this worked out because I think it's important. All right? But now we're going to move through this pretty quickly. So Zach Edey obviously would be our number one. He was not getting that information from all of the other NBA people. Now, I can sit here and prognosticate about this any which way you want. But if the NBA people come to you and they say, we don't have you in the lottery, we don't have you in the first round, that is significantly going to impact the amount of money that you can make. And the contracts now are structured in such a way that you're going to, in the number one pick, you're making X amount of dollars for 3 years. It's the same reason I said I don't understand why these gentlemen always hire agents, because they're all slotted into certain salary slots right now. And if you're number one, you're getting this. If you're number two, you're getting that. And it works all the way down as a structure now. So this is the way we're doing it and these days. But I had Zach Edey very, very high because I respect the representation of his NCAA basketball career and what it's meant. And then when I did my statistical analysis, which I think is valid, points, rebounds, steals, block shots, and assists are the 5 tenets of college basketball. That's what makes a good player. It's also the 5 tenets of pro basketball as well. And what I've always said from minute one, this is our 12th show, but what I've said from minute one is I like people that can show up in a lot of categories. If you look at LeBron James's stat line right now, he's averaging 20-plus points. He's probably averaging more than 8 or 9 rebounds. He's doing very well with steals, doing very well with block shots, doing well with just about every assist. He's assisting at a very high level. So when you add all of that up, then you say, okay, now we have a numerical dashboard from which to work from. And that's what I was excited about to do here. So in the number 2 hole, the Charlotte Hornets are going to draft, in my opinion, based on all the numbers that we were given, overtime elite, G League, we didn't differentiate. Ausar Thompson, one of the Thompson twins, turned out to be the number 2 metric on the RSS. So he's 6'7", 207 pounds, played in the overtime elite. He has a twin brother who will be drafted in the top 5 or 6 picks as well. But what you're going to see here is we kind of slid some people out of this first round that everybody has slated as first-round picks that we don't see are even close in the first round. And when we did it numerically, it made it really, really clear for me that that we were kind of on the right path here. So at number 3, the Portland Trailblazers, they have a really bad history of drafting bad big men. And so I'm going to go ahead and let them draft Victor Wembanyama right here in the 3 hole. I'm not a big fan of his. I've said this. But I also let the metrics speak for it. So when we did his numbers, when he came up, when we did everything he had, he came up in the number 3 spot. And I don't think he's draftable that high in that spot, but it was interesting to see. He's 7'5". They list him at 220 pounds. I'd be surprised if he's 220 pounds. So he's from France as well, playing a pro league over there. So his numbers are somewhat bell curvable, I think. But we wouldn't know which way to go, really, which way to bell curve it.
Right.
Okay. In the number 4 slot, Houston, I think they'll take Amen Thompson, 6'7", 205 pounds, out of the overtime elite as well. That's who I would take in that spot. I like that young man a lot. Number 5, people don't have him this high. His numbers were staggering when I put them on the table, and I looked at it and I said, I really don't understand what people are talking about here. I like this young man a lot. I didn't really see him in the 5 spot, but Detroit will take Trace Jackson Davis, 6'9", 245 pounds, out of Indiana. Left-handed, terrific player. I like this young man. I think he's getting a bit of a bad rap. Number 6, Orlando. I didn't believe that this would be this high, but again, that's why we let the numbers do the talking. I don't think I would put Drew Tim from a Gonzaga in the 6 hole, but that's where he came out. He's 6'9", 230 pounds, very highly skilled, but I just don't think his athleticism holds up well in the NBA. Number 7, Indiana. This is a young man I'm very high at. I'm not sure I'm this high on him, but this is what the numbers showed. Azuolas Tubelis. He is 6'11", 245 pounds, out of Arizona. His numbers were absolutely off the chart. He spent a couple of good years in college. He's very big. Lefty, can do a lot of different things, and I really like his game. I just didn't know about the 7. I wouldn't have had the courage to put him in a 7. That's why I stuck to the mathematical formula. Number 8, Washington. A lot of people are going to criticize this pick right here. 6'2", 185 pounds, out of the G League, Scoot Henderson. Everybody has him in their top 3 picks. I think he's got a rocket on his back. He's one of the best athletes you'll see in some time. I would just be curious to see if he makes it through an NBA with the style and the careless way that he plays basketball. He just doesn't have a care in the world out there. It's a great thing. I think you could liken him to Ja Morant a little bit in that regard. But I think I moved him down a little bit because that's what the numbers told me to do. Okay. Number 9, Leonard Miller, 6'10", 211 pounds, out of the G League. I like this young man a lot. I think he could even move up higher depending upon the needs of the NBA team. And then in a 10 spot, we have the Dallas Mavericks. I was down on this young man during the season. I looked at him during the combine. I looked at his numbers. His numbers are off the chart, so we're going to follow the numbers. Oscar Tshiebwe, 6'9", 260 pounds, out of Kentucky. 6'9", 260 is a force. Now, can we work on his skill level? Can we do some things that make him a little bit more NBA ready? I think we can. But right there, we're going to go. Again, 11, Orlando. People have this young man much higher. I do not. Brandon Miller, 6'9", 200 pounds, out of Alabama. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA. I'm not as high on him as everybody else is. And again, if we have freshmen that have gone through the NCAA because they were forced to go to the NCAA, and then they come into the NCAA, there's a chance that might really help them. There's a chance that it might hurt. I would say if you looked at the total spectrum of everything since that rule was put in place, that's probably hurt a lot of people's draft position, because I think if that young man, Brandon Miller, went out as a high school senior, he probably would get drafted higher than 11. Number 12, Oklahoma City, Bryce Sensabaugh, 6'6", 235 pounds. He's got an NBA-ready body, played at Ohio State, had a great freshman year. I think he's going to be a terrific player in the NBA. But again, we'll have to see how his skill level adjusts to the NBA game. Number 13, 13, we have Brandon Podziemski, 6'5", 205 pounds, from Santa Clara. I don't really like him in that spot, but his numbers were really good, so we left him where he was. 14, New Orleans, Kobe Brown, 6'8", 250 pounds, out of Missouri. He's played a number of years in the NCAA. I think this young man could be an interesting look as we move forward. I think he's pretty good. Atlanta, in the 15th spot, I would take Deron Holmes if I was Atlanta, and I think I'd be getting a steal. 6'10", 225 pounds, played for the Dayton Flyers out of the Atlantic 10, and I really like that young man's upside. I think he can have a great career moving forward. Number 17, the Los Angeles Lakers. This is just how the numbers popped out, but I figured let's go with a little bit of a hometown group here. UCLA, I didn't even have him in the first round right away, but Jamie Jaquez, 6'7", 225 pounds, from UCLA. He has all the makings of being a serviceable forward in the NBA. I don't ever see him being an all-star of that type, but I think he could be a good player. 18 is Miami. I gave him Keontae George, 6'4", 185 pounds, from Baylor. Most people have Keontae George listed much higher than this. I did not. I think he's a good player. I think he's going to struggle in the NBA because there's a lot of guys up there just like him. 19, Golden State. I took Bryce Hopkins out of Providence. His numbers were terrific. A lot of NBA people aren't that high on him. I like him. I think he played for a good coach, Ed Cooley, in Providence. I think he'll be ready. He's got a more of an NBA ready body than some of these other players do. Houston, 20th pick. Again, this would be a hometown pick. Jerace Walker out of the University of Houston. He's right in that frame. Much higher on every other draft board. They have him in the 5 or 6 spot on most of the other draft boards. I am just not absolutely that high on him. I think he's going to be a good player, but I'm not really sold on him to that level. The Brooklyn Nets have next 2 picks. So they'll come in at 21 and 22. I like Terrence Shannon for them. 6'7", 207 pounds out of Illinois. He started out in a couple of different places. He's very, very good player, has an NBA-ready body, can shoot, can handle, can pass, and I like his game. So I think they should take him there. In 22 spot, Brooklyn, I have them taking Mohamed Gayer. He's 6'11", 210 pounds out of Washington State. He's going to be a bit of a project, I think, but he's got the body that you'd like in the NBA. Gets up and down the floor extremely well. And I think if you get him into the right system with the right guard set, he could be a really good player. So in Portland, in 23 spot, most people don't even have this young man on their draft board at all. I can't understand it for the world of me, but I like him quite a bit. I like DeAndre Williams, 6'9", 205 pounds, out of Memphis, played for Penny Hardaway. I think he's a terrific player. He's got size. He's got shooting ability. He reminds me of Noah Clowney a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Brooklyn because he's right in this. I went strictly by the numbers, but Brooklyn could take Noah Clowney as also in this spot because Noah Clowney's actually from Brooklyn. But I'm going to take DeAndre Williams, 23, with Portland. If people are watching him closely, I think he could slide up the chart a little bit. 24 Sacramento is going to be Ousmane Ndiaye, 6'10", 210 pounds. He's an international player. Big, great wingspan, can do a lot. Number 25, a lot of people have looked at this gentleman's weight and think, oh my God, he's 165 pounds. How does he make it through an NCAA, NBA season? But he's tough as nails. That's how he does it. And he's got good range. He's a great, great shooter. And I'm going to go with Terquavion Smith out of North Carolina State. He's 6'3", only 165 pounds, but you get a great per diem in the NBA, so maybe they'll put some weight on him. Okay, we're at the 26th pick with the Indiana Pacers. We selected Colby Jones for them. This is a great pick if you're in this spot for Indiana. 6'6", 207 pounds, played at Xavier. Really good player, can shoot it, can pass it, has a 6'7" body, and can do a really lot of things on the perimeter. So I like him there, and I think he's a little bit more NBA built and ready. 27, Charlotte. A lot of people underestimate this young man. He was a gentleman who played for the University of Florida, collapsed on the floor, the playing surface, had difficulty finding doctors that would clear him, and then became an unbelievable story and Cinderella run for Kansas State this year. So I'm going to go with Keontae Johnson. I just like his story. I'm not sure about him in the pro ranks yet, but he's 6'6", 230, and brought Kansas State to the Final Four. Pretty close to winning it all. I thought they did a great job there. Utah will take Noah Clowney, 6'10", 210 from Alabama. A little bit thin, but he makes up for it with his shooting ability. I think that he and DeAndre Williams are 2 really good late first-round picks. If you're looking at like a Tayshaun Prince type player, a good late first-round pick that can be a serviceable NBA player for many years, I think you find that in either Clowney or you'd find that in Terrence Shannon or DeAndre Williams. Moving on, 29 pick here, we're going to take Amani Bates from Eastern Michigan, 6'9", 190, started out at Memphis, has had a little bit of bounce and grind to his career. He came over to Eastern Michigan. He's multi-talented. He can do a lot of things. He's 6'9", and he reminds me around the basket a little bit of George Gervin with his length and his wingspan. He can do so many things, and he's very smooth. I think he's got to settle down a little bit. But with the last pick in the first round, the Clippers are going to take Ryan Kalkbrenner, 7-footer from Creighton. This gentleman has a lot of growth potential and has a lot of ability to have an upside, as we say. He's got to get a little stronger, though. But he's 7 foot. He can change some shots, and he can do some stuff. So that's the end of the first round, Pete.
Okay.
We slid through it pretty good. I like it. I think there's some changes that I'd make along the way, but I like it because it lets the numbers do the talking, and it allows the representation to be there in the data. And then we can go back and say, okay, we're going to mix this up and mix that up, and we'll see some people take their name out of the draft a little bit. But in that first round right there of the people that I listed there, except for Zach Edey coming out, I don't think you're going to see too many other players come out. DeAndre Williams from Memphis said he's staying in. And so with these other players that come out, you'll see other players bounce up.
Do GMs get emotional on their picks?
I think they sometimes can. What happens is they call it the war room, and a dream of mine would to go into an NBA war room as they're like a middle first round pick, because what happens is you have a list of 3 names, and by the time you come 15, all 3 of your names might be gone. And now you need to scramble. You need to talk to your scouts. You need to talk to your coaches. Do you think the head coach has involvement in this process in the NBA? Some of them will, some of them will not. General managers will handle their business and sometimes don't like input from the coaches. So that's kind of the war room situation. So I love that because you can get blown up. You know, like let's say, for example, the Spurs trade their pick and the other team that comes up to get it doesn't want Wembanyama. What happens then? Everybody starts scrambling. Everybody starts moving and grooving. And so there is some emotion in it. And I would imagine that you would see the teams that have operated the best with the draft have done real well because they've done their homework on some of these players later in the first round. Everybody knows about this top 10. Everybody is really, really aware of that. Where you can make your money if you're Brooklyn in the 21 and 22 hole is by getting some really good players and also looking at your current roster, seeing who's going to be back, and seeing what you need to fill in. But I think the Nets have a really good foundation, having eliminated their big 3 of kind of high-priced guys that were really not achieving great stuff, you know, with the guys they had with Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. Just go back and say that again. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden, and they weren't winning to the level that they all expected that they would win, and to the level that a lot of us expected that they would win. And I believe that chemistry is really, really important here. And in physics is important too, because you're talking about in the physics of basketball, you have to, especially as a coach, what I refer to also is the conservation of momentum. And so what that means is if you had a water bottle in front of you on the table, okay, you would sit there, that water bottle would stay there until some force came along and moved the bottle. And that's the way that I see coaching. That's what I see great coaches do, because they understand the conservation of momentum. Push that bottle too far, too fast, and you're going to wind up spilling water all over the table. Don't push the bottle far enough, and it might come back and spill all of you. So you need to know the proper amount of force in order to push that bottle down the table, in order to make it move, in order for it to get to a better place. And so that's the physics of it. And so I know people are probably spinning their head right now going, I don't watch this show because I specifically don't want to talk about physics, biology, and science. We're basketball people, and I failed all those subjects in high school, but I did go back and research a little bit of them. So we're going to keep rolling, Pete, into the second round here. I did both rounds because I wanted to see how it all shaped out with the 60 players I had in front of me. And there were a few players that I didn't see on this list of 60 that I added in myself that I thought, well, they should certainly be on this list. Adamo Sanogo from UConn wasn't on the list. I wanted to add him. Tristan Vukovic, the kid from Serbia, wasn't on the list. I wanted to add him and see how it goes. Vukovic doesn't have great statistics, so I don't know if we got him into the first round or not. With Zach Edey going out, I think we could pump him in there, but I think I might have thrown him in here at some point. All right, so with the 31st pick, the first pick of the overall second round, Detroit Pistons are going to take Marquise Novell, 5'8", 160 pounds out of Kansas State. And you might sit there and say, Coach, how is a guy 5'8", 160 pounds going to make it in the NBA? And I'm going to say the same way Spud Webb did, the same way this young man for the Atlanta Hawks is doing it. Okay, it's about skill level. It's about the ability to impact the game. And when you see these young men that are out there that pack that power and that finesse, but in a very small package, I think it's something to watch. There's 2 gentlemen here that I think if you're an NBA scout, I wouldn't be scared of their size. Marquise Novell is certainly one of them, and the other one I would say is Kendrick Price from Memphis. We'll talk about that a little bit later. 32nd pick, Indiana. Now, everybody has this gentleman way, way higher than I do. Cam Whitmore, 6'7", 225 pounds from Villanova. super athlete. I just think would have really enjoyed a little bit more time on the college scene to season his game, to really grow, and to show that he could take a team and turn them into a winning program. Because Villanova suffered its worst year of the year. They had a new coaching change. They lost Jay Wright, the obviously legendary coach. Again, somebody who might have been on that top 10 list as well. But they're kind of like, when I look at a player who comes in and says, I want to be one and done, I want to see your team win, I want to see you do really well, then I think you might be ready for one and done. But Cam Whitmore certainly going to be in the NBA someday, 6'7", 225, but I have him in the second round. Most people have him in the top 10 picks. Again, I make no apologies. 33rd, San Antonio. Taylor Hendricks, again, we had him way, way higher as well, too. But then I watched him in the combine a little bit. We did the dissection of his numbers. We looked at everything we had. Taylor Hendricks we have at University of Central Florida. He's 6'9", 210 pounds. San Antonio can take him if they wound up with Victor Wembanyama. I don't know that they take Taylor Hendricks as well, but that could possibly happen. Number 34, Charlotte. I like Marcus Sasser in this pick. Again, people talk about his size, but he's 6'2", 195 pounds. He's a great player out of the University of Houston. I think he was more representable in that run than the big man Jarace Walker was. I thought Marcus Sasser had a much, much more profound impact on that whole thing than Jarace Walker did. I see Jarace Walker 6'9" and has the NBA size and ability and body, but I love Marcus Sasser. I think he could be a good pro and be around for a little bit. With the first pick for Boston, the Celtics, in the 35 slot, I gave them Jalen Clark, 6'5", out of UCLA. Really good numbers, really good player. At the second round, you might see them take Sanogo because of, again, emotion. But it's not only just emotion, Pete, because that will drive ticket sales. Will UConn fans want to go see Sanogo play in Boston?
Yes.
Sure they will. Sure they will. Absolutely. And so that's what drives it as well, too. So I think that might be part of it. But in 36, Orlando, I have Adamo Sanogo, 6'9", 245 pounds out of UConn. I really like this young man. He's got a great athletic performance profile, and I think he could grow and get better. He's just not going to be able to knock people around like he did in college because of his body, his size, and his athleticism and dominance. But even in the NBA, if he gets the right set of guards, I think he could be really, really dominant. 37, Oklahoma City. I had this young man higher when I saw him in the combine. Heard a couple of different things about his level of training and how much he's preparing for this. Julian Strawther, I love his shooting ability. He hit the Noxzema shot against UCLA late in the game where they just turned around and pitched it to him. Played at Gonzaga, 6'7", 208 pounds. I really like him. But to see him in the second round pick, I think you're going to get some value here if you can get into the second round. I think that if you were a first round pick in the lottery and you didn't like your pick, you get down into the second round here, it's a little bit different than other drafts, I think, where in the other drafts you see most of your value in the top of it in the first 10 picks. And I think that could be certainly a value this year. I don't see Wembanyama as the great franchise player that everybody has him out to be. But I think there's a lot of depth in this draft, and I think you can wind up with some really good players in the second round, late first round. And so Julian Strawther, I think, could be a really good player in the NBA. I like when I hear somebody doesn't have a great work ethic about approaching things as training, like Anthony Edwards in the NBA has an unbelievable work ethic. That's what I think makes success. I think talent meets work ethic is unbeatable. And when talent meets non-work ethic, they're easily beatable. And so that's where I'm at with Strawther. I'd like to see him work a little bit harder on his frame, on his body, and all that other stuff. Because when you come out of a combine and you do all those athletic driven performance things too, it shows up. Okay, so now we're going to go to 38, Sacramento. Baylor Shearman, 6'7", 205 pounds. He's the third Creighton Blue Jay that we have on the board here. They had an incredible year. They've had an incredible run of late. I don't really love this here, but the numbers put him there, so I took him. 39, Charlotte. I like this pick if you're a late second round pick, and you get Isaiah Wong out of Miami, 6'3", 180 pounds. Had an outstanding college career, leading to Miami to the Elite Eight 2 different times. And I think he's a bucket. It's what we refer to in the coaching business as a bucket. He can score buckets. And when you cover him tight, he can score. When he gets open, he's athletic and he can do some stuff. I think he has a little bit of a surprise athletic ability in the NBA that's a little bit hidden right now. I think his athletic ability is better than people think. 40, the Denver Nuggets, people aren't going to like this, but I got Jordan Hawkins in the 40 spot. They have him in the first round from UConn. I get it. He's a freshman, had a great year. I love him, but he was on a really talented team, and I'd like to see him, when he gets to the NBA, is he going to be able to do all of that stuff wide open, that he had because he was playing with the UConn Huskies. So I moved him down a little bit, 6'5", 190. He is an elite shooter, but he doesn't have an NBA body right now. Okay, we're moving. 41 Charlotte. Everybody has this gentleman really high, but the numbers didn't point to that. G.G. Jackson from South Carolina, 6'9", 215 pounds. He's like the Thompson twins, because he has size and he has some guard skills, can put it on the floor, can do some different things with it. But the numbers didn't lie. 42 Washington, James Nagy. His brother plays in the NBA as well. This young man could be an outstanding second-round pick. Could even slide up into the first round depending upon what a team is looking for. He's 6'10", 225 pounds. Played Pro Bowl in Barcelona. I've seen highlights of him. He's a lot like his brother. He is an attacker around the rim. He's going to try and dunk everything. He's going to run the floor and get in the middle of the floor. You're not going to see him running the three-point line too much. Number 43, the Portland Trail Blazers, Anthony Black from Arkansas. Everybody has this gentleman much, much higher than I do. He's 6'7", 195 pounds. I like him, but I didn't have him up in the top 8 picks like everybody else does. He played 1 year at Arkansas. I'd like to see a little bit more out of that. 44, San Antonio takes Derek Lively out of Duke, 7'1", 215 pounds. I had him higher in my original draft, and one of the things that we can talk about, Pete, at the little bit of this at the end, is what about a gentleman that has a statistical anomaly in one category that's incredible? And what does that mean? It means when you look at Derek Lively's block shots, he's way, way, way above anybody else in the stratosphere here. I mean, he's way above it. And then if you add in a thing that I like to talk about, which is changed shots. Okay, he didn't block it, but they didn't make the shot because he's so tall and so long they had to shoot it over him. He intimidated them. Patrick Ewing was a dominant defensive player in the NCAA. He dominated with blocking shots, but also people were just flat out afraid of him when they went to the basket, and they missed shots because of that. So I think Lively could move up certainly because of his dominance in that one area. But when we did his statistical numbers, he showed up 44. 45, I think he'd be a great second-round pick. 45, Memphis Adembona, 6'10", 235 out of UCLA. Probably a little bit more physically ready than Lively. Probably a little bit more physically ready than some of the other centers like Nagy, possibly. He's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. I like him there. Number 46, the Atlanta Hawks. Again, this is somebody that everybody has much higher in everybody's top 10 and everybody's top 13 picks. They have Grady Dick from Kansas, and I just don't get it. He's 1 year at Kansas. His numbers were okay. He's 6'7", 195 pounds. He's very thin. Doesn't have the NBA body. Doesn't have the NBA game. If you're looking for an open shooter that can stretch some, keep some people off of your good players, quite possibly. But again, that's not a top 10 pick. That's a guy that's down in the second round here. And I think, to be honest with you, Mr. Grady Dick will have a difficult time making an NBA roster. I would take Jalen Wilson from Kansas over him any day of the week. Okay, so now we move to 47, Los Angeles. Kason Wallace, 6'4", 185 pounds out of Kentucky. Everybody else has this gentleman much higher. I say the same thing with I said with Oscar Tshiebwe. I'd like to see them win more. If you go in and you're a great dominant player, then I'd like to see you win more. And I think he was the point guard this year on the Kentucky team that really underachieved. And so that kind of stuck out with me a little bit. 48, the Clippers. They can take Jalen Hood Schifino out of Indiana. 6'6", 210. They have this gentleman listed ahead of Trace Jackson Davis in many, many drafts. A lot of people have him listed very, very high. I just don't. I don't see him in the same realm. Cleveland Cavaliers, another gentleman, Arkansas, everybody's high on. Nick Smith Jr. I'm just not as high as I am on some of the other players here.
Yep.
He's 6'4", 185 pounds, comes out of Arkansas. Good player, but I just don't see it. Number 50, Oklahoma City is going to take Nikola Jurisic. He's an international player. His numbers are off the charts. 6'8", 215, moves it well, shoots it well, passes it well. I think he could be in the NBA a lot like some of the other international players that they have in there right now that are doing very well. I think he fits that mold. 51 is Brooklyn. They're going to take Amari Bailey, 6'4", 190 pounds out of UCLA. I thought this gentleman might benefit from a little bit more time in college, but I think he's had a good career. He really looked good in the combine. I just worry about him being a guard that dominates the basketball as much. He's a little bit like James Harden in that when he has the ball, he's good. When he doesn't have it, I think he struggles a little bit. So I would be careful with that. 52 Phoenix, we're going to say Sidi Sissoko, 6'7", 6'6", 180 pounds. He's out of the G League. He's a very, very good, talented player. It would be a good second-round pick, a good shot for people. 53, Minnesota. I was surprised this young man fell this far. A lot of people high on him, but our numbers just didn't dictate it. Julian Phillips, 6'7", 200 pounds, from the University of Tennessee. Great coach with Coach Barnes, but I just didn't see it there with the numbers. 54, we're at Sacramento. Ricky Council IV. He's out of Arkansas, 6'6", 205 pounds. Arkansas has a lot of guys on this list, and that's why I'm not as high on some of them, because they had a great team with all of this talent, and they did really, really good. But sometimes that doesn't always work when you get out onto the pro floor and you're no longer out there with all those really good players. Go and get drafted by the Washington Wizards and see how your life is when you're struggling with those guys and see how good your game is. It's a little bit easier to look good when you're moving up on that top level with a really good team and fit in. So I would watch UConn guys. I would watch Arkansas guys for that same reason. Okay, so now Indiana. I'm going to slip in my guy here, Tristan Vucevic. I really like this young man. I think you could slide him up a little even higher than this. 6'10". He reminds me of Jokic. He reminds me of the gentleman from Dallas, the bigger guy from Dallas. And I think he could have a pretty good career in the NBA. I think people are missing him. He's from Serbia, and so it's difficult to get over there and watch a lot of that stuff. But I think his numbers weren't great. That's why I didn't put him a little higher. But he's pretty good. 56, Memphis. I'm going to give him a hometown pick. This is Kendrick Davis, 6 foot, 180 pounds, out of Memphis. He's probably the best lead guard in the draft, him and Marquise Noel. But their size is going to hold some people up. But those two are probably the best two lead guards in the draft as far as being able to run a team, get you in shape, get the ball to the right people, and also score when necessary. Chicago Bulls, they're going to wind up in 57 spot. I had this gentleman much higher. The numbers didn't show it, and neither did he at the Combine. I think he's kind of a positionless player in the NBA, so I worry about him a little bit. But it's Andre Jackson, 6'6", 210 pounds, out of the UConn Huskies. So that gives the UConn Huskies 3 picks, but I didn't put any of them in the first round. I had Sanoga, and I had Hawkins, and I had Jackson. I think they're all going to be great picks, but I don't have them there in the first round. In 58 hole, Philadelphia, this could be a good one. Arthur Kaluma, he's the third Creighton guy that we have on our list. 6'7", 225 pounds. He's got a great body, comes out of Creighton, did really good things with them. But again, let's throw Creighton into that category of having 4 guys that are on this list, and so it'd be difficult to really tell out how good they are individually when you get to play on that group like that. But with the last pick, of the last 2 picks, we have 58, we have 59, we have Washington. Jet Howard out of Michigan. Everybody likes him. I think if this guy's name was Ron Howard, nobody would draft him. But I think because his name is Jet, everybody likes it. But I think if his name was Ron Howard, you might go see his movie, but you wouldn't want him in the first or second round. I'm going to put him in there because that's what the numbers said. But I think he's a little bit overrated. He's 6'8", 215, came out of Michigan. I'd just like to see a little bit more out of him. He's one of the guys I think that should take his name out and return to college. 60, the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm going to give him Dariq Whitehead out of Duke. 6'6", 195 pounds. Has a great frame, a really good body, but didn't have a great year this year for Duke. And I think that was a lot of it was there was a new coach. Mike Krzyzewski had just retired. I think there were a lot of pieces that were in motion there. But I think Dariq Whitehead has a chance to be, as a second-round pick, you're getting some high value there if you can grab Dariq Whitehead in the 60th pick. And then as you go through it, now obviously our number one's not going to be there, so Zach Edey's going to go out. And then you're going to have a different set of circumstances there. But then you just bounce everybody up one spot, and there's lots of people that we have still on our list that we can bounce in there and get on that list. There were some people that we just didn't have as high as other people did. Cam Whitmore from Villanova, we just didn't have him that high. Grady Dick from Kansas, we just didn't have him that high. I think if you're drafting late second round, you take Jalen Wilson from Kansas, you're going to be getting a very good player, and I think he's better than Grady Dick, just personally. But maybe I could be proven wrong. It's the beautiful thing about the draft conversation is that you can be really wrong. And that's why Jokic, where was he taken? 41st overall. Difficult to see the European players, difficult to see players from Serbia sometimes, but Jokic was the 41st pick overall. So if you're thinking there's no value in the second round, probably one of the top 5 players in the NBA right now is taken in the 41st pick. And so there is some value there. It tends to show up sometimes with the international players because they don't get the same frame of visibility that the players over here get. And so I think that's there's a steal waiting to happen. Tristan Vukcevic could be that steal this year. I think he might be somebody you pick up in the late round that people are going, wow, why didn't somebody grab him in the lottery when they grabbed all these other guys? But that's what we have for our first 2 rounds, Pete. And again, we promise we'll come back right before the draft on the 25th, and we'll do another shot at it. We'll really, really tighten it up. We'll really watch a lot of film in between now and then. But in the last couple of minutes, how many minutes do we have left, Pete?
You have 3.
3 minutes. Okay, so quickly with the Heat and the Nuggets. All right, they start tonight, Game 1 in Denver. I think that if the Miami Heat are capable of doing what they've done in just about every series that we've had so far, that's taking a game from the opposing team on their home playoff floor. In the first 2 games, they got the Celtics, and it really changed the series a little bit. I thought they got the Celtics first 2. Well, that really changed the series, and then they went down 3-0. Celts all the way back and won 3 games, but then really laid an egg in that Game 7, where there was just, the Garden was ready to explode at every moment. And there's an expression in the Bronx where I live, and it's very true today, never more true in the game of basketball than it is today. If you live by the jump shot, you will die by the jump shot. If you live primarily only by the jump shot, that's how you will also die. That's what happened to the Celtics in Game 7. They had a good run in those previous 3 games because they were hitting shots. They were making shots. They were in good rhythm. None of that was evident in Game 7. They lived by the jump shot in that game. They hoisted a lot of bad shots that created transition opportunities for the Heat, and that's where the basis of the whole series was in shot selection and in the ability of the Heat to get around the basket and do some things better than the Celtics did around the basket. I also couldn't tell you what their rotation was like with the Celtics. When Robert Williams was playing some and then Horford was playing some, they just didn't seem to have a really good feel for this. And I think that you have Celtics fans worried because Jason Tatum has a tendency to disappear from time to time. And there were some big games where they really, really needed him to step up. And I just, especially in the fourth quarter, his performance in the fourth quarter wasn't great. I'm looking to see some stats on that. I'm looking to see some numbers on that. But, Pete, before we go, I wanted to give out our 2 songs of the day. And the first song I wanted to give out was a Pink Floyd song.
Okay.
That's a really, really good song. And it's called Welcome to the Machine. And it's by Pink Floyd. And I love that song. And the last piece I'm going to give you, the last song that I want to give you, and I want to dedicate this song, Pete. And we're going to dedicate this song to the 2023 Westfield Senior High School and Westfield Voc graduating class. This is an awesome time of the year. I'm so proud of all of these graduates and the great work that they've done. Many are going to move on to college. Many are going to move on to their careers, and it's just an exciting time. And I've always worked with the youth of America, and they're just exciting people and great people. It's so great to be on the forefront of that. But to that whole group of seniors graduating, I want to send out a song by Journey, and it's called Don't Stop Believing. It's so important to believe in yourself, to believe in us, and to believe in what we do. You have a great week. We're in the zone. We'll bust it out next week, and we'll be ready for you. Have a great week, and stay well.